You were taught to follow, you were raised to comply, and now you wonder why your opinions feel rehearsed, why your decisions feel borrowed, why your confidence collapses the moment someone with more certainty walks into the room. You sit in meetings, and you wait to see which direction the group leans before you speak. You scroll through your feed, and you absorb whatever framework is trending that week, reshaping your thoughts to fit the consensus. You stand in front of someone with a title, a degree, and a louder voice, and you feel your spine soften. You tell yourself you are being reasonable. You tell yourself you are being thoughtful. But what you are actually doing is waiting for permission to exist. Nietzsche saw this. He saw the herd mentality not as a social trend, but as a psychological disease. He understood that weak minds do not choose to follow crowds and authority because they lack information. They follow because they lack the internal structure to stand on their own. They follow because autonomy terrifies them more than submission. And you have been trained in this. You were raised in systems that rewarded obedience and punished deviation. You were taught that fitting in was safety and that standing out was risk. So now, as an adult, you do not even realize how much of your identity is crowdsourced. You do not even notice how quickly you surrender your frame the moment someone challenges it. This is not about intelligence. You can be sharp and still be controlled. You can be educated and still be docile. Weakness of mind is not about IQ. It is about psychological sovereignty. It is about whether you can hold a position when the room disagrees. It is about whether you need validation to feel real, and most people cannot. Most people are walking aggregates of borrowed opinions, adopted moralities, and inherited fears. Nietzsche calls them the herd, and the herd does not lead. It follows, it does not create, it imitates, it does not define, it conforms. This script will show you 7 psychological reversals that explain why weak minds naturally collapse into crowds and authority, and why strength is always located outside the consensus. These are not lessons, these are observations. You either recognize them and adjust, or you remain in the herd and spend your life being managed by people who do not understand what you do. Most of you will leave before this ends. You will feel uncomfortable. You will feel attacked. That is the filter. If you stay, you separate. If you go, you will never be ready. Put your phone face down, turn off the noise, and listen, because your autonomy depends on it. If this hit you, write "I am the strategist" once in the comments, just to mark the day your mindset changed. You seek consensus because you cannot trust your own judgment. That is the first mechanism. You enter a conversation, and before you form your own conclusion, you scan the room. You measure who agrees with whom. You wait to see where the status sits, and then you align. You tell yourself you are being collaborative. You tell yourself you are considering multiple perspectives, but what you are actually doing is outsourcing your certainty. You do not want to be wrong more than you want to be right, and that is why you wait. You wait for someone else to take the risk of a position so you can echo it safely. Nietzsche understood this as slave morality. The herd does not generate values, it inherits them. It does not ask what is true, it asks what is safe. And safety is always found in numbers. So you adopt the group's language, you adopt the group's conclusions. You laugh at the jokes everyone else laughs at. You nod at the ideas everyone else nods at. And you feel intelligent because you are surrounded by agreement. But you are not thinking, you are syncing, you are pattern matching. You are performing alignment to avoid the psychological cost of standing alone. Here is what happens in real time. You are in a work meeting. Someone with authority floats an idea. It is not a good idea. You know it is not a good idea. But no one speaks, so you wait. You wait to see if someone else will object, and when no one does, you stay silent. You tell yourself it is not your place. You tell yourself it is not worth the friction. But what actually happened is you accepted the frame. You let the authority in the room define reality, and you complied. You handed them your certainty in exchange for comfort. And now their frame is the operating frame. You are inside it. You are playing by rules you did not set. in a game you did not agree to. That is what weak minds do. They accept the frame. They step into the court. They let someone else become the arbiter of what is reasonable, what is smart, what is acceptable. And once you do that, you have already lost. Strong minds do the opposite. They do not wait for consensus. They form a position and hold it until someone presents a stronger one. They do not need the room to agree. They need the logic to survive, and that makes them dangerous. Because your approval cannot manage a person who does not require your validation. A person who trusts their own perception cannot be gaslit by the group. That is why the herd fears them. That is why the authority resents them. Because they exist outside the control structure, they are not seeking permission. They are looking across, evaluating, deciding, and that is psychological sovereignty. You react defensively because you are still seeking approval from the person challenging you. That is the second mechanism. Someone criticizes you. Someone questions your idea. Someone dismisses your position, and immediately you feel pressure. Your chest tightens. Your thoughts scramble. You start explaining. You start justifying. You list your credentials, your reasoning, and your evidence. You need them to see that you are not stupid. You need them to take back the judgment. And the more you explain, the weaker you become. Because explanation is submission, it is you saying, please reevaluate me, please approve of me again. And they do not. Because you just confirmed their frame. You confirmed that their opinion of you matters more than your own. Nietzsche despised this. He saw the need for external validation as the core disease of the weak. The herd mind does not ask, am I right? It asks, do they think I am right? It does not care about truth. It cares about status. It cares about belonging. So when someone challenges you, you do not defend the idea. You defend your position in the hierarchy. You assert your acceptability, and that is why you lose. Because you entered their frame, you stepped into their evaluation, you made them the judge and yourself the defendant. And the defendants do not have power, judges do. Here is what it looks like. Someone at dinner makes a subtle dig at your career. You feel it, it stings. And instead of letting it sit, you respond. You explain how much you have grown. You list your recent wins. You subtly try to re-establish your value in their eyes. And they nod. They smile. But they are not impressed. They are satisfied because you just performed for them. You just auditioned for their approval. You confirmed that their opinion has weight. You confirmed that you are still looking up. That moment was not a defense. It was a submission. You handed them authority the moment you tried to convince them you deserve respect. Strong minds do not explain themselves to people who have already decided. They let the judgment sit. They allow the silence to create discomfort, because silence is refusal. Silence says, I do not need to convince you. Silence says, your evaluation is not my concern. And that flips the frame. Suddenly, the person who challenged you is uncomfortable because you did not react, you did not submit, you did not enter their court, you stayed in yours, and now they are the ones wondering if they miscalculated. That is frame warfare. That is how power moves, not through explanation, through refusal. You obey authority because you were conditioned to associate it with truth. That is the third mechanism. You see a title and your nervous system shifts. You see credentials and assume they're correct. Someone introduces themselves as a doctor, a professor, or a CEO, and you start deferring before they even speak. You do not evaluate their argument. You assess their status, and that is how you get controlled. Because authority is not the same as accuracy. Status is not the same as strength. But you were trained to conflate them. You were taught to believe that people in charge know more, think better, and see further. And most of the time they do not. Most of the time they are better at performing certainty. They are better at holding a frame. They are better at making you doubt yourself. Nietzsche called this the will to power in reverse. The herd does not want to dominate. It wants to be dominated. It wants someone else to carry the weight of decision, the burden of responsibility, the risk of being wrong. So it elevates authority and then obeys it. It creates leaders only to surrender to them. And once you do that, you stop thinking, you start repeating, you start enforcing. You become the herd's immune system, attacking anyone who questions the structure. You are too weak to ask yourself. Here is how it shows up. You are in a conversation with someone older, someone credentialed, someone with a platform. They say something you instinctively disagree with, but instead of voicing it, you hesitate. You think, maybe I am missing something. Maybe they know better. So you stay quiet. You nod. You let it pass. And later, you find out you were right. The authority was wrong. But by then the moment is gone. You already complied. You already deferred. You already taught yourself that your perception is less reliable than their status. And that is the conditioning. That is the loop. Every time you defer without reason, you weaken your own frame. Every time you obey without evaluation, you train yourself to follow. Strong minds evaluate the argument, not the speaker. They do not care if you have a PhD, a blue check, or a stage. They care if your logic holds. And if it does not, they dismiss it. Not loudly, not emotionally, just internally. They do not adopt your framework because you have status. They adopt it if it is stronger than theirs, and that makes them immune to most social control. Because social control runs on deference. It runs on the assumption that you will not question the person in charge. And the moment you do, the entire structure loses leverage. You feel silent because you are afraid of what it will reveal. That is the fourth mechanism. Someone says something, you disagree, but instead of staying quiet, you respond immediately. You fill the space. You explain your position. You soften it with qualifiers. You add, I could be wrong, but, or just my opinion, but, and you think you are being reasonable. You think you are being humble. But what you are actually doing is preemptively surrendering. You are deflecting judgment before it even arrives. You are saying, please do not see me as arrogant. Please do not see me as difficult. I am still one of you. And that is a weakness, because you just prioritize being liked over being respected. Nietzsche understood that the herd fears silence because silence exposes independence. When you speak, you reveal your need to be heard. When you explain, you reveal your need to be understood. When you justify, you reveal your need to be accepted. But when you stay silent, you reveal nothing. You become unreadable. And unreadable is threatening, because people cannot control what they cannot predict. They cannot manage what they cannot manipulate. So silence becomes dominance, not because it is aggressive, because it is a refusal. It refuses the frame. It refuses the game. It refuses to participate in the constant approval seeking that the herd runs on. Here is what it looks like. You are with a group. Someone makes it plain you know is incorrect. The old version of you would have corrected them. You would have cited a source. You would have explained the nuance. But now, you just let it sit. You disagree, you agree. You observe. And the person who made the claim starts to feel it. They begin to sense that you are not convinced, so they explain further. They get louder. They look at you for validation. And you give them nothing. Not hostility, no approval, just neutrality. And that is more powerful than any rebuttal, because you did not argue. You just refused to be moved. You stayed in your frame, and they are now trying to enter it. Strong minds are comfortable with silence because they are comfortable with themselves. They do not need the room to affirm them every 30 seconds. They do not need constant feedback to know they exist. They can sit in a conversation and say nothing and feel no anxiety because their frame is internal. Their validation is internal, and that makes them dangerous to people whose power depends on your reaction. If you do not react, they lose leverage. If you do not explain, they lose control. If you do not fill the silence, they have to, and whoever speaks first just revealed their discomfort. You mirror the in-crowd's energy because you are more afraid of exclusion than of relevance. That is the fifth mechanism. You walk into a room and you scan it. You pick up the tone. You match it. If the group is joking, you joke. If the group is serious, you get serious. If the group is cynical, you adopt cynicism. You do this automatically. You think you are being socially intelligent. You think you are reading the room. But what you're actually doing is erasing yourself. You are becoming a mirror. You are reflecting whatever is expected, so you do not stand out, and that is how you disappear. Not physically, psychologically. You become so good at blending in that no one remembers you. You become so agreeable that you are never valued, because value comes from distinction, and you have none. Nietzsche saw this as the death of the individual. The herd does not want individuals. It wants replicas. It wants interchangeable parts. So it punishes deviation and rewards conformity. And you comply. You flatten your personality. You suppress your edge. You become neutral, palatable, safe. And then you wonder why no one respects you. You wonder why your presence does not shift rooms. It is because you are not present. You are a reflection. You are an echo. And echoes do not lead. Here is how it plays out. You are at a social event. The group starts mocking someone who is not there. You disagree with it. You actually respect the person they are mocking, but you laugh anyway. You add a comment. You participate, because not participating feels like judgment. It feels like superiority. It feels like you are placing yourself above the group, and you cannot afford that. So you join in. You sacrifice your actual opinion to maintain your position in the crowd, and that is the trade. You buy belongings with integrity, you buy comfort with selfhood, and the cost is that we stop being someone worth following. Because followers do not follow mirrors, they follow people who hold a shape the crowd does not. Strong minds do not mirror. They anchor. They walk into a room, and it adjusts to them. Not because they are loud, not because they dominate the conversation, but because they do not bend. They do not scan for approval. They do not shapeshift to fit. They just are, and that creates gravity. People start orbiting them, not because they are trying, because they are solid, and solidity is rare. Most people are liquid. They take the shape of whatever container they are poured into, but solid objects do not pour, they sit, and everything else has to move around them. You explain yourself to people who did not ask because you cannot tolerate being misunderstood. That is the sixth mechanism. Someone misreads your intention. They assume something about you that is not true, and immediately you feel compelled to correct it. You send the long text. You have the clarifying conversation. You make sure they know you are not that kind of person, and you think you are protecting your reputation. You think you are managing perception. But what you are actually doing is handing over your frame. You are saying, your perception of me is more important than my own. You are saying, I need you to see me correctly. And that is a need. And needs are leverage. The moment you need someone to understand you, they control you, because now you will shape yourself to fit their understanding. You will adjust your behavior to match their comfort level. You will become smaller so they feel safer. Nietzsche despised this. He believed that the strong do not explain themselves. They are, and those who understand, understand. Those who do not matter. The herd cannot accept this. The herd needs to be understood by everyone. It needs to be liked by everyone. So it spends its entire life managing impressions, correcting misunderstandings, and explaining intentions. And it never realizes that every explanation is a submission, every clarification is a plea, every defense is proof that the other person's judgment matters more than your own. Here is what it looks like in real time. You post something online, someone misinterprets it, they leave a comment that completely misses your point. And you feel it. That itch. That needs to be corrected. So you reply, you re-explain. You add context, and they reply again, still missing it. So you reply again, and now you are in a loop. You are trying to force understanding. You are trying to make them see you the way you see yourself. And you will never succeed because they are not trying to understand you. They are trying to position themselves, and you just gave them the attention they wanted. You just confirmed that their misunderstanding has power over you, Strong minds let misunderstandings sit. They do not chase clarity with people who are not interested in it. They do not explain themselves to those who have already decided. Because explanation is only valid when the other person is open, when they are not, explanation becomes performance. And performance is a weakness. It is you saying, "Please see me differently." And the moment you say that, you lose. Because you just made them the evaluator. You just stepped into their court. And they do not respect defendants. They respect people who do not need a trial. You ask for permission because you were taught that autonomy is arrogance. That is the seventh mechanism. You want to make a decision. You want to take an action. You want to shift direction. But before you do, you check. You ask your partner. You ask your boss. You ask your friends. You frame it as respect. You frame it as collaboration, but what it actually is fear. You are afraid that if you act without permission, you will be seen as selfish, reckless, or brutal. So you ask, you wait for approval, and when you get it, you move. But you do not move as a leader. You move as someone who was granted permission, and that is how you stay controlled. Because people who need permission do not set the direction, they follow it. Nietzsche saw this as the herd's deepest sickness. The refusal to act without consensus, the inability to decide without external validation. He believed that the truly powerful do not ask. They decide, they act, and they deal with the consequences. They do not need the group to co-sign their choices. They do not need authority to bless their path. They trust their own judgment more than they fear disapproval. And that is what separates them. Not intelligence, not resources, just the willingness to move without permission. Here is how it shows up. You want to leave your job. You know it is the right move. But before you do, you talk to everyone. You ask your family. You ask your mentor. You ask your friends. You gather opinions. And what you are actually doing is diluting your own clarity. You are inviting doubt. You are outsourcing your certainty. And the more people you ask, the more reasons you will find to stay, because most people will tell you to stay, not because it is right, because it is safe, and they want you to be safe. They want you to stay in the herd, so you do. You stay. And years later, you realize you sacrificed clarity for consensus. You traded autonomy for approval, and now you are somewhere you never wanted to be, surrounded by people who never had to live with your choice. Strong minds decide alone. They gather information. They consider perspectives. But when it is time to move, they move. They do not ask. They do not wait. They act. And if they are wrong, they adjust. But they are never paralyzed by the need for permission, because they understand that permission is control, and control only works if you give it away. This is what weak minds do not see. They think they are being humble. They believe they are being wise. But what they are actually being managed for is, they are being contained. They are being kept inside a frame they did not build, playing a game they did not choose, living by rules they never questioned, and they do it willingly. Because the alternative, standing alone, is too frightening. The alternative, trusting themselves, feels too arrogant, so they stay in the herd. They follow the crowd. They obey authority, and they tell themselves it is virtue. But it is not a virtue. It is fear. Nietzsche understood that fear is the engine of conformity. People do not follow because they believe. They follow because they are afraid of what happens if they do not. They are so scared of being cast out. They are fearful of being wrong alone. They are afraid of carrying the full weight of their own existence, so they outsource it. They let the crowd think for them. They allow the authority to decide for them. And in exchange, they get safety. They get belonging. But they lose themselves, they lose their edge, they lose the one thing that could have made them dangerous, their independence. And here is the consequence most people do not see until it is too late. When you spend your life following, you become forgettable. You do not get remembered. You do not get respected. You get tolerated. People aren't friendly to you. People include you. But no one thinks about you when you are not in the room. No one wonders what you think. No one seeks your guidance, because you never gave them a reason to. You were always available. You were always agreeable. You were always safe. And safety is not valuable. Safe is replaceable. Strong minds are not safe. They are sharp. They hold positions others will not. They walk away from rooms where others stay. They refuse frames that others accept. And that makes them rare. Rarity creates value. Scarcity creates demand. When you are not always available, people start to wonder where you are. When you do not always agree, people begin to value your agreement. When you do not explain yourself, people start trying to figure you out. That is leverage. That is power. And you cannot get it by being more agreeable. You get it by being less. This is not cruelty. This is not manipulation. This is realism. Nietzsche was not interested in making people comfortable. He was interested in showing them the truth. And the truth is that most people are psychologically weak, not because they lack intelligence, because they lack sovereignty. They do not trust themselves. They do not defend their own frame. They collapse under social pressure. They need the crowd to tell them they are right. They need authority to tell them they are safe. And that need is the chain. That need is what keeps them controlled. You do not have to live that way. You do not have to seek consensus before you think. You do not have to explain yourself to people who have already made up their minds. You do not have to mirror the crowd to belong. You do not need permission to move. You can hold your frame. You can trust your perception. You can stand alone and feel no fear. But it requires something most people will not give. It requires you to stop valuing comfort more than clarity. It requires you to stop fearing exclusion more than irrelevance. It requires you to become the kind of person the herd resents, not because you are cruel, because you are free. Here is the challenge. The next time someone challenges you, do not explain. Let the silence sit. The next time the crowd moves in a direction you disagree with, do not follow. Stand still. The next time you feel the urge to ask for permission, decide instead. Move, act, and see what happens. You will feel discomfort. You will feel exposed. That is good. That is the feeling of sovereignty. That is what it feels like when you stop being managed. If this hit you, write, "I am the strategist," once in the comments, just to mark the day your mindset changed. Most people will not do this. Most people will watch this, feel something, and then return to the herd by tomorrow. They will go back to seeking approval. They will go back to following the consensus. They will go back to waiting for permission. And they will spend the rest of their lives wondering why no one takes them seriously. You do not have to be most people. You can be the one who stayed, the one who listened, the one who adjusted. If you found this valuable, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you want more, but do not do it to support me. Do it because you recognize that this kind of clarity is rare, and rare things should be protected. You are not here to be liked. You are here to be respected, and respect is only given to those who do not need it. Remember that, and act accordingly.